Putin is going very desperate right now, because he literally went for Kazakhstan for help as a result of these most recent attacks against oil infrastructure of Russia. Then at the same time, Pentagon decided to switch the sides and start supporting Russia. Soon you will know exactly what I'm talking about. And then finally Robotyne frontline was breached. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Let's go straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. Oh, so yeah, today we have this picture from one of Russian social media called ВКонтакте, or maybe even Одноклассники, the equivalent of Facebook in Russia. And so there is this woman who is wearing a yellow coat, and behind her is just a picture of the sea, ocean, or lake, whatever, doesn't matter. So you might ask, so what's so suspicious, what's so questionable about it, right? Not unless you are a crazy Z patriot. In this case, you will see that the color of the sky is blue. You already know what I'm talking about, right? And the color of the coat of the woman is yellow. That is why you do have to write a note to the local police station saying that this woman supports Ukraine, she's propagandizing some prohibited symbols, some prohibited colors, the combination of yellow and blue, all this kind of stuff. And so she's basically a spy from Zelensky, probably himself. And guess what? The police actually started the investigation into this woman. They invited her to the police station. She had to have a written explanation why she was taking pictures like this. And basically it goes as following. Well, dear police, it is out of my responsibility, it's not in my control to change the color of the sky. And this jacket I bought long time ago, even before your so-called special military operation. I do not have much money to buy jackets every single week, because I don't know what's gonna be next prohibited thing, what's gonna be next prohibited color combination. That is why I do not see anything extraordinary in this picture. And the police did not suspend the investigation, they did not give their final conclusion, so who knows, maybe the higher court of Russia will now have to inspect this photo to see if this particular woman discredits the Russian army. So yeah, there you go, ridiculous Russian propaganda. But okay, as always, now it is time to get serious, talk about Russia being literally on fire, Putin getting desperate, going for Kazakhstan for help, Pentagon changing their position, at least in one question, and then a quick frontline update. To begin with, as you might have heard for the last several days, there was several attacks against critical infrastructure of Russia, such as, for example, first of all, it is worth mentioning, 3 airfields, one in Engelsk, one in Yeisk and one in Morozovsk, were recently a target of Ukrainian drones. According to the Russian propaganda, they were able to intercept 53 drones, not a single one of them were able to reach their destination, but some videos on the internet, they prove otherwise. But then, if you do take a look at hard facts, such as, for example, satellite images, just in Morozovsk alone, there were at least 30 Russian airplanes located on this airfield, and according to different sources on the internet, anywhere between 3 to 6 of these aircrafts could have been partially or even fully destroyed. Then it was another Ukrainian drone in Voronezh which was targeting the local Russian aircraft factory. And probably one of the biggest events, at least of the last week, is that an oil refinery in Tatarstan, which is located more than 1100 kilometers away from the front lines, had a visit, let's call it like this, from a Ukrainian unmanned aircraft vehicle. At first, the Russian propaganda, as always, did not want to acknowledge that this had anything to do with Ukraine. For example, they did say that, well, this was not a UAV. In fact, this was a Cessna 172, just flying in the Russian sky for no reason. Then we have this guy, Mr. Kartapolov, who already was making pretty ridiculous statements in the past, and he basically said that, well, we should not worry that much about it. If needed, Russian army, the army can expand its efforts, and we can still take Kiev in 3 days or less. We just really need, we just really need to want to do it in order to achieve this. My question to you, Mr. Kartapolov. If your air defense cannot intercept a UAV, which is flying more than 1100 kilometers across your country, how? Just how are you planning to capture Kiev in 3 days. But probably the most surprising reaction came from the United States, specifically from the Pentagon and its chief Lloyd Austin, who said that America does not support this kind of activities from Ukraine, targeting Russian oil sector because this does create very big destabilization in oil prices around the world. And in fact, Ukraine should stop doing these activities. He then also said that Ukraine should find another way how to counterattack Russian. He then also said that Ukraine should find another way how to counterattack Russian activities. And then my question to Mr. Lloyd Austin would be the following. So if you don't want Ukraine to attack oil targets inside Russia, if you don't want Ukraine to do combat activities on the territory of Russia, probably you should then increase the military support to Ukraine in the first place, so that Ukraine can properly protect itself on its own territory and launch more effective counteroffensive using your equipment. Not just yours, obviously, but in general equipment from the West. I'm not saying that Ukrainians should not be grateful for American support, because this is one of the biggest supporters for Ukraine in this war. Ukraine is extremely grateful to America, but statements like this are just, to be honest, they do not make much sense. Guys, please let me know down below in the comments what do you think about this statement by Mr. Lloyd Austin. But on the other hand, on the other side of Russia, they are getting pretty desperate. Putin does not show it, at least yet, but he is already kinda panicking what to do. For example, by one of the most recent reports by the Institute for the Study of War, Russia is actively seeking, which is basically a polite way of saying begging, Kazakhstan to have some gasoline imports from this country. So as you can see, these attacks against oil targets inside Russia against the oil industry does have a significant effect on the Russian economy, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. Now let me give you an extremely quick frontline update, then we're gonna talk about breach in Robotyne. But guys, before we go there, if you don't mind, if you do think that Ukraine should continue such activities against oil industries in Russia, can you please simply like this video and subscribe to my channel? I will take a look at the statistics, and this will be the best representation of how you, people, the viewers of this channel, what do you think about this whole oil industry situation in general. You can also follow me on Instagram. Let's get some subscribers there as well. I'm gonna be posting some death stories. The link to my Instagram is down below. And so yeah, we make our first quick stop in Donetsk, where one of Russian FABs literally fell inside one of small grocery stores, but it did not engage. For this reason, Russians acknowledged that it was their FAB, but like, sorry, there was some kind of malfunction. But just imagine if it was activated, they will obviously immediately blame Ukrainians for these post consequences. Then we have a picture from Kharkov, where Russians start to use their cabs closer to this city. And as you can see, these are just the very minor consequences of such destructive actions. In Poltava, unfortunately, as a result of Russian activities, some civilian buildings were severely damaged. These were the intercepted Russian aerial targets, because overall in the last 24 hours Ukrainian air defense was able to intercept 20 out of 20 Russian Shahed drones. Since we did quickly mention Kharkov, right here is the video from this region where defense fortifications are continued to be constructed, and then is another video from Zaporozhye where something similar activities are happening as well. We can see already a lot of fortified defense structures, and then also including Dragon Teeth, which is helping against the Russian military vehicles advancement. Coming to the actual front lines in the east, our first stop brings us to Terne, where Ukrainians were able to repel one of assault attempts by Russians and deconstructed at least 4 pieces of military equipment. Another attempt by Russians was prevented in Krasnohorivka, and at least 7 pieces of Russian military vehicles were deconstructed, and then Ukrainians themselves launched their own counter activity, destroying one of Russian fortified structures. Talking about Chasiv Yar, which is pretty much the third Bakhmut in the east, this is exactly where Russians are concentrating their efforts right now, and they decided to use exactly the same strategy as they already did in Bakhmut and Avdiivka previously, which basically means trying to advance to the north and to the south of the city, while simultaneously doing a frontal pressure to its eastern borders. Besides that, another heavy flamethrower of Russian TOS-1 Solntsepek was deconstructed by Ukrainians. And then right here is a very interesting video from Berdichi, where we can see pretty much a lot of destabilized and not moving Russian military vehicles, which are concentrated around one Ukrainian Abrams tank. And this is basically exactly what happened. Ukrainians, instead of trying to tow this tank or repair it or anything like this, they just left it there as a bait. Because Russians did looks like want to tow this tank for themselves, so they can take pictures with it, take videos with it, and then the Russian propaganda will be saying like, look, another Western military vehicle, another Abrams is now being destroyed, send as many as them as you want, we gonna deconstruct all of them. Well, Ukrainians left it there, Russians tried to capture it, they brought one military vehicle, another military vehicle, third, fourth, fifth, all of them were left standing in the same place surrounding these Abrams. This is an extremely easy but genius at the same time strategy, just you have to understand the mindset of the Russian propagandists. Guys, go ahead and watch this video for yourself. It is on my Patreon, it's definitely worth seeing, the link is down below, and if you want to try this series for yourself, there is 1 week of free access for every single one of you. Once again, the link is down below. Thank you guys so much for your support. And so yeah, just last couple of quick words from the east before we switch our attention and finalize everything in Zaporozhye, Robotyne. So first of all, to the west of Donetsk, there is this pretty big military warehouse where Russians were hiding their tank with the shell, metal shell, the one we've been talking about in my previous episode. Well, Russians thought that this was giving them 100% protection. Apparently it did not turn out to be quite true. And then, ultimately, in Toninki, another attempt by Russians was prevented, which caused them to lose some military vehicles and infantry. And ultimately, switching our attention to the south, unfortunately, according to the Ukrainian military, Russians were able to breach Robotyne front line in Zaporozhye, but as of right now, at the moment of recording this video, Ukrainians are still holding to this city. It is still under the control by Ukrainians. Russians did try to advance closer to the center of the city. They were repelled and they had to advance backwards. So, as of right now, Robotyne is still a Ukrainian city, as it will always be. Guys, if you did hear something new in today's episode, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. I always try to talk about the news not too many people are talking about. Please, once again, go ahead and check official The Russian Dude merch. Right now there are very good discounts, especially if you are a Patreon member. Don't forget about Patreon as well, obviously. Thank you guys so much for watching and see you tomorrow.